Welcome to the 19-9 podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Meyer. I'm joined by Josh Barnett, co-host and co-owner of 19-9. Our guest today is Chuck Everson, Long Island native, 6th-round draft pick in the NBA, and most importantly for today was a member of the 1985 Villanova Wildcats championship team. I'm going to dish it to Josh to get us started with the questions.
Hey, Chuck, really appreciate you coming on the pod and joining us today. I know that we had tried to link up earlier at a time, and it just got a little hectic, not on your end, but on our end, and I apologize for that, but I'm happy to have you on today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I can't wait to get started. It sounds like it's going to be fun.
Yeah, so we usually start these pods off, especially when we have some guests for the first time on here. We're all connected by the game of basketball and the culture. You know, we talk a lot about the culture and how the basketball culture brings everybody together and brings everybody in. And so just to kind of get us started here, we would love to know your origin story to the game of basketball. How did you fall in love with the game? When did you start playing? Was there a certain playground that you went to that you were growing up that got you hooked? Were there mentors in the community, that type of thing? And just give you the floor to kind of tell us how you found the game or how the game found you and how you fell in love with it.
Basically, I was 8 when I started playing, and I wound up playing we had something. I grew up in Brentwood, Long Island, and we had something called Brentwood Youth Activities, BYA, and they had, like in-house teams and stuff, And I started there, played on the same team as my brother. It was a 7- and 8-year-old team, and he wound up later playing at Lafayette for Butch Van Brennekoff. So both my brothers played college basketball, but how we got started, we played in the BYA, and it was a 7- and 8-year-old team, like I said, and what they did was they selected an all-star team, and they had to have one 8-year-old and one 7-year-old. And I was the second best player on the team. It was a guy named Tim Darby, who was really, really good athlete as a young kid. And my brother got selected, and I was, I know I'm better than my kid brother, So
Yeah.
I took offense to that and started working real hard, and then wound up going to Brentwood High School and played for a guy named Marty Rigger, and Stan Kellner was an iconic coach. He was the coach. He coached Mitch Kupchak,
Nice.
who was the Lakers GM for a while, and played with the Lakers and the Washington Bullets. And they had things called the clinic, and we would have guys come out from the town. Our town was big because it had four middle schools. It had like 15 elementary schools and 2 different buildings, 2 high school buildings. One was Ross, one was Sonling. It was on one piece of property, so both buildings were there. But it had 2 sports teams. So North and West went to Sonling, and East and South went to Ross. So I wound up playing for Ross, and a guy named Ronnie Stewart, who played for St. John's in '85, same a year ahead of me. He played at Sonderling. So we had a lot of good players in the town, and went through the thing I had when I was in 4th grade. The varsity coach, Marty Rigger, let my dad bring me in and shoot on the side basket when the varsity was practicing at night. So every night I would go and shoot, and you had to stop dribbling, hold the ball when the coach was talking, kind of thing. By the time I was in 6th grade, I was running non-contact drills with the players, with the varsity. Just passing drills and stuff like that, dribbling drills and stuff. And that really built my love of the game.
Why don't kids hold the ball when coaches are talking anymore, man? I can't get my son's 8-year-old team to stop, man.
That's a great. I don't know. I wish I knew the answer to that. I've coached for a long time after I got done playing, and that was always the biggest problem. Hold the ball.
I'm very mellow, pretty mellow dude, but something gets my blood going, man, when I'm trying to coach and the balls keep bouncing. Like they see a different side of Coach Barnett when that happens.
I bet they do.
During the game is the worst. I'm an assistant principal, so I'll have kids like on the bench trying to grab a ball, dribble on the bench during the game. Like, what are you guys doing?
Well, I'll tell you something funny, because I was an official for a while, so we would do everything from the little kids games to the varsity, and in order to get everybody, they tend to listen to you when you're 7'1" and 370 pounds. They listen, So I just said, hey, put the balls down. We had a kid break his leg last week. We don't want anybody, and that never happened. I just made
right.
And they were like, "Oh, okay, we'll put the balls down." And the parents would tell the kid, "Put the balls." So we never had an issue after that.
We can't have that insurance.
There you go. Now you know what to do, Barnett. We had a kid break his leg.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I think we used to tell them that when they were roller skating in gym class, and then we actually did have somebody break their leg.
Yeah, that came true.
Whatever you got to do, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, let's go into a little bit about Coach Massimino. I want to know what it was like getting recruited by him, or what were your first memories of meeting him? Because he's one of those characters. We actually talked to Brian Harrington before too, and so he just had fun stories of Coach Massimino, and I'm sure you've got some too. So, what was your first impressions of him, or what was it like getting recruited by him?
Well, my first I met Coach Mass when I was probably in the 8th grade, going into my 9th grade year that summer. He had a basketball camp up in the Poconos, and it was a team camp. So our team would go. My high school coach brought us up there, and it was a great camp and stuff. And I heard this guy talk, and he's fiery, just like you remember him on the sideline, running up and down, and very enthusiastic. Everything he did. In fact, he signed all his letters that he ever wrote enthusiastically. So that was his thing. So he was always enthusiastic. And I'm like, man, this guy's awesome. I want to go back. I want to play for this guy. So I go home when the camp's over. I tell my dad, I go, hey, look, I really want to play for this guy. He goes, well, you better start practicing because they're pretty good. So, you better get ready. So as the camp went on, that particular camp, and then down the road as I got older, they had these things like an extra help session. Mm. So I would go to the extra help session, and you didn't have a cell phone to wake you up or an alarm clock or anything. So every 5 minutes you're sleeping and you wake up and you go, is it time yet? Is it time yet? So I would be there at 7 o'clock in the morning every morning. And sometimes I was the only guy there, and sometimes there was 10 of us. But one thing that happened like clockwork was Mitch Bonaguro, who was the guy that wound up recruiting me at Villanova, assistant coach, and Coach Mass were riding around in a golf cart, and every single morning they saw me working on my game. And they actually went over to my coach, my high school coach, Marty Rigger, and shook him and said, hey, look, we got to talk to you. We need to get in with this kid. The kid was working. He's working every day. He's got a good work ethic. We love the kid. We want to bring him in. And that's how I got recruited.
Man, that's great.
Were there any other schools when you were making that decision coming out of high school that were? I know you said that you went home and said I want to play for this guy, so it might have been open and shut case for you. But were there other schools that were in the picture for you?
Yeah, I mean there was a lot of schools in the Northeast. Just about. It was cool in one regard. Like we had back then, you had like a who's who of coaches come through the front door. And sometimes they stayed for dinner. And I'm a Norwegian by heritage. My family's Norwegian, and now I'm kind of an honorary Italian, hanging around with Massimino all these years. So Jimmy Valvano comes over, and he was just left Iona. He's with Iona at the time.
Yeah.
So he comes over and. My mom used to make this thing with like a hamburger helper and pasta, like because the Norwegians can't cook Italian food, And she called it zippy beef. So we all liked it. We had no idea that it was, So she fed zippy beef to Jimmy Valvano, and it was so embarrassing, man. I go, Jimmy, I'm sorry, my mom fed you that. So he joked about it. But it was, I narrowed it down to, Lefty Drizel was there a lot, But he was crazy though, JB. I mean, so we're driving to a game to play a summer league game, and he's driving, he's talking to me the whole time, and we're running red lights and stop signs, and so I said to the guy that was running my recruiting, a guy named Steve Rochester, I said, hey, coach, I can't. This guy's crazy. I can't
survive.
I almost killed me getting to the game.
We always like to talk about the personalities from back in those days, the coaches and you guys obviously have a great one now with Jay Wright up in Villanova. But we talk a lot on our podcast about how much more of a politician most of these guys have become, just with the money involved in social media and all that stuff, the message boards and the internet and just in general. But we really miss the the personalities of the Jim Valvanos, the Rollie Massiminos, the Bob Knights, on and on, Lefty Drizel, John Thompson, obviously.
Yeah.
Have you seen that change you yourself in being much closer to it than we are too? Do you ever see that we get back into some of those big time personalities, or is it too button up now?
I think it's probably the latter a little bit. I mean, social media made it difficult to be a student athlete in today's world. It really is, because the way I relate to it is, let's say the three of us went, to the local hangout to go have a beer or whatever on an off day, right? And one of you guys gets sick. Well, we got a guy watching the door. We got a guy helping you. We got a guy talking to the manager. And we got a line of guys blocking you. So when you walk out the place, nobody knows. It's a rumor that Aaron was there. It wasn't, we don't know for sure.
Right.
Now everybody's got their cell phones out. And before you get out the door, it's already up on YouTube or Instagram or whatever else there's out there, So if you take a picture with somebody and you're in a bar, you run the risk of losing your scholarship before you even finish playing. So you didn't have a chance right now in the way they run things. You don't have a chance to really be a kid. Kids make mistakes. You guys are both in the business. Kids make mistakes, and you have to have a chance to be a kid. That's how you learn. That's how you grow, by making mistakes. And I think today's they don't get a chance. They have to be a pro right from the jump, which is not easy to do for everybody.
Sure.
And a guy like Jay, does a great job of keeping everybody huddled in, and he's on it. He knows everything about what they do. You know what I mean? There's no doubt. Like when they go to play in the Final Four, they literally see the bus, the hotel, the training room, the locker room, the court, and then back to the bus. They don't. It was like they was sequestered. Where we're playing with Coach Mass. He let us get out and experience it a little bit. I mean, I remember distinctly Ron Stewart, who I told you played for St. John's. Ron was over at a different hotel from us, and Dwayne McClain and I went over to visit Ron and Chris Mullen, in the middle of the thing, so we can have a moment together and say, man, can you believe we're both here at the same time? How cool is that? And then Mass would take us, we went to the horse farms, as a team. So we would do stuff like that. So, next thing you know, we're there with Seattle Slew and Affirmed and Ali Dar, all these famous thoroughbreds, and we're petting Seattle Slew. It was really cool. I mean, you got to do some stuff.
There's a great team picture of you guys with Coach Mass that I saw online. Yeah. That was fantastic.
Yeah, in front of the breeding shed. I think yes. In fact, I have a poster of it up on my wall.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, so it was fun, and now, it's really all business. I think that's the big difference.
I'll tell you what, Jay Wright suits though, Barnett, not politician suits. Those things are too nice for a politician.
Yeah, he just lost his tailor.
Did he? Oh man,
he just passed away. Like I would say 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
I hate that.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
Yep. I'm sure he was close to him. He does a great job with him. Yeah, no doubt.
Yep.
Well, let's go into talking a little bit about Villanova career. It starts with that freshman year, the loss to Phi Slamma Jamma in that regional final. What do you remember about that game?
Well, a few things. A lot of memories are off the court, but we played that game at Kemper Arena, in Kansas City, and so now what happened was we played Iowa with Bobby Hansen, and they had a guy whose last name was Payne. I can't think of his first name, but he was real good too. We beat them, and we're sitting under the basket to watch the first half of the Houston-Memphis game. And Clyde comes down and just takes off. Andre Turner steps in to take a charge, and he folds his legs up like only Clyde Drexler can and goes over him and dunks the ball. And I said, oh, man, we could be in big trouble. So we go to play the game, and the funny thing was, I knew it was going to be a bad day because back then they had like arcade games in the lobby of the hotel, and they had a Ms. Pac-Man, and we're getting ready for the bus, and I had a few minutes to hang out, so I'm going to go play Ms. Pac-Man because we had one in our locker room, and all the guys on our team were fairly good at the game, and Drexler walks in. He goes, you mind if I play with you? I go, no, let's play. Well, he goes first, and he's up to 50 or 60,000 on the first Pac-Man. I go, are you really? So I said, Clyde, I'll be right back. I forgot something in my room. Don't worry, I'll be here for a while. He got like 80,000 points.
Oh my God.
So you get 3 Pac-Men, right? And he beat me. All he needed was the first guy. I was like, and I thought I was pretty good. I go, this is going to be disaster.
This is not a good omen.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, it was, and then we went out there and they had Misha and Elijah Wan and Ben Anders and all those guys, man. They were so good,
Did you think that NC State stood a chance against them?
Not really. I mean, and listen, NC State and Villanova both proved anybody can beat anybody on one night. But yeah, I mean that was that was the greatest air ball in the history of college basketball, right? Witt shoots that ball. It's funny because today on Facebook, I don't even know why I did this. I found a picture that we have a thing called Summer Jam at Villanova, and Jay brings all the basketball alums back, and a lot of the 85 guys come back. And we're hanging out, and we went to back to the hotel on a break, and I'm sitting with Gary McLean and Wilbur and Eddie Pinckney, and in comes Derek Wittenberg out of nowhere. So he comes over, he goes, oh, look, he starts breaking our chops about, which game was better. So he sits with us, and we took a nice picture, and we hung out with Witt, and, we're telling him our game was better than yours. Come on, let's take it easy, Witt. You shot an air ball, He goes, that was an alley-oop. That was an alley-oop. So we're going back and forth, having fun with each other. And, that was a great game. I mean, that was a great Final Four. The game that was really incredible, if you guys remember, was the Houston-Louisville game.
Yeah, Doctors of Dunk.
Played about 3 feet above the rim.
Right.
Everybody was dunking. It was wild back then.
Yeah, everybody kind of considered that the de facto national championship, that game, and didn't pay much mind to NC State. It is interesting that you guys ran up against Pi Slamma Jamma, and then in '83, and then they have that huge upset in '83 with NC State, and then 2 years later you guys are back, and it's against Georgetown, the Beast of the East, as they were known, and you get the upset, but kind of scaling it back, the Final Four had 3 Big East teams. You already alluded to that earlier. 3 of the 4. How neat was it for you guys to just be a part of a historical Final Four like that, where 3 teams came from the same conference?
It was awesome for the conference, because the conference was still in its infancy. It was only a couple of years old, so it was great for the conference. It was almost 4 for 4, because Boston College lost to Memphis at the buzzer on a crazy shot, and then Memphis, I think, beat Oklahoma with Tisdale and those guys. I think that's what happened. But I know BC came really close to beating Memphis, where it could have been, who knows, 4 out of 4. But it was awesome. And listen, all year long, St. John's and Georgetown were number 1, number 2, number 1, number 2, back and forth all year long. That was the year of the sweater game with
John Thompson,
Louis and John Thompson, and So so we lost 10 games going into the tournament, and 5 of them were to the number 1 or number 2 team in the country.
Wow! And you guys were firmly on the bubble too, right? Like you were waiting to see if
as it turns out, we weren't, but we all thought we were,
right?
Because we didn't realize that it went to 64 teams. That's the first year it went to 64 teams.
Yeah.
So we thought, oh my God, we're not going to get in. But to back that up a second, we played our last game of the season in Pittsburgh, and they beat us by, 30. And Massimino says at halftime, he goes to the starters, he goes, listen, you got 2 minutes to play. If you're not going to play, I'm taking all of you out, and I'm playing everybody else. You guys will not see the floor in the second half. That's what happened. So he took everybody out, and I got stuck because I wasn't really on the first 5, and I was kind of like the first big guy in the game. So I kind of got stuck getting stranded on the bench, and I didn't get as much time as I thought I would in the second half. And it was the first time that CBS gave the player of the game to Villanova's whole second team.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
So that never happened before.
That's
so
crazy.
Yeah, so then we had to get them in the first round of the Big East, which we did, and then the Final Four was us against St. John's, Georgetown against Syracuse, and of course the final was Georgetown and St. John's.
Yeah, crazy.
Pretty wild.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the championship game, just your role in it, because I rewatched the game, and there is a real interesting play with you right around halftime, and I was like, just knowing that you were coming on, I have to get like, okay, we've done some like tales from the bench, but have a guy that was in there in the game, and then kind of has a critical play, almost a turning point in the game. What was it like, but in the moment and then after the fact, did you reflecting on it?
It's funny because during the game, I'll tell you a couple things. During the game, you really don't have any control of what's going on, So Patrick comes down and jams 3 in a row, bang, 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 and then Mass goes, "All right, Chuck, go get Eddie." I go, "Yeah, now you're gonna put me." The guy just dunked 3 in a row. Okay, so I go in the game and we hold the ball for a little bit, and Georgetown lets us kind of hold the ball. So we went to the basket. Prez put up a shot. I tip it. Prez gets the rebound, puts it in. Now we're running back, and Wingate's got the ball, and he's coming down at a pretty good clip. I'm sprinting down. I'm ahead of Reggie, so Reggie's coming in, and at this point we're up by 1. So I have to put a hard, clean box out on him, because I don't want to hear Coach Mass take my head off in the locker room if I don't, and he tips the ball, and that's all I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So I put a clean box out on him, and he turns around and gives me the hands in the face, and turns around and runs away. And I'm screaming because I know I'm not going to get in the game. I'm not going to get back in the game unless Eddie gets hurt real bad, and nobody wanted that to happen, So I'm screaming at the referee to get a 1-and-1, and Brian Harrington runs out. The rest of the guys went out, and Rollie runs out, and there's a famous picture of him pumping his fist as he gets in the locker room,
Yep.
So we get in there, and he rips his tie off, and he starts screaming that they disrespected Chuck. They're not going to do, what kind of shit is this? They're not going to do this. And everybody, before we even got a sip of water, was ready to come out and go. And the wild thing about it, guys, was we exited behind our bench, but our locker was behind the Georgetown bench, and they did the same. So we had to pass in the hallway.
Oh.
And those guys were snickering and laughing and like, we got this. It's nothing. So it's 1 point. It's no big deal. We're going to come out in the second half and kick your ass, And, we come out in the second half and shoot 9 for 10. So I don't realize that this play, was a big turning point in the game. I had no idea. I'm just thinking it's a game. You're playing the game. You're in the moment, And we get in the locker room after we win, and the celebration starts to die down a little bit. And I got 40 reporters in front of me. I said, what the hell what do you want to talk to me for? I played 3 minutes. And they said, tell us what happened with Reggie. So, it's they credit me with the spark that, we came out and shot 9 for 10. Who knew, And I'm frankly, I've been milking every inch of that for about 36 years, man. We've had a lot of fun. Absolutely. And I've run into Reggie several times, which has been fun.
Yeah.
At the 2002 All-Star game, in Philly, we ran into each other and literally bumped into each other. And I was with Harold Presley in the retired players hotel. So he bumps into me and I spin him around. I go, I'm ready now. You ready? He starts laughing and gives me a hug. And I have a picture of us shaking hands. And I ran into him a couple times after that. He's a great guy, as are all the Georgetown guys.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
Those guys had a bad rep because you couldn't get to know them. Like at the Big East luncheons and stuff, they'd have 2 players from each team at a table. So all those guys were told to keep their head down. They couldn't, and if Thompson saw them talking or looking at them, he'd put his hand up and everybody's head would drop, So, it was an us against them mentality that they had, and they wouldn't let you get close to them. And then, throughout the years, I've met half the team, maybe more, and they're all great guys,
How much do you think familiarity played in that upset? I know that you guys played them pretty tight 2 games during the year too, and so instead of saying like Memphis State running up against them in the national championship and just seeing them for the first time, you guys were seeing them for the 3rd time, and then some of you guys, older class or upperclassmen, were seeing them for 6th, 7th, 8th time. Some of the same players. Did that factor in a lot in your opinion?
I think so, because, we beat those guys once a year. that one time, and the first time, my freshman year, Eddie had 27 and 22. We were down 5 with 45 seconds to go or something like that at the Palestra, and we win that game. The next year, Wilbur hits a shot at the buzzer. The year of the championship, we hadn't beaten them. We came close. We went to overtime with them in one game and lost by 5. And ESPN ran that game the morning of the championship game. So we're all laying in our hotel rooms watching that game. And that kind of gave us a little confidence shot to go in and win, because we knew we could play with them. We weren't afraid, and we weren't intimidated of them. And we kind of knew that, hey, listen, we didn't beat them yet this year. We have beaten them every year so far. Whereas if we would have played St. John's, it might have been a different story because they seemed to have our number. I mean,
right.
We had a very, very difficult time with their lefties, with Walter Berry and Chris Mullen.
I think anybody has a tough time with those two. I don't think it has much to do with them being left-handed, just them.
But Walt was crazy. He would shoot from his hip. You wouldn't even. His release point was never the same. It's a consistent thing for most shooters. But that guy would shoot it, all different angles, and and he was very difficult.
Playground. That's a playground thing too.
Yeah, they forget how good Walter Berry was. Mullen usually gets most of the St. John's pub from '85, but Walter Berry was the truth.
Yeah, he was the guy that turned everything around, because in '83 they won the Big East. That was Billy Goodwin's last year, and Billy came from San Jacinto, the junior college, as did Walter. So he talked Walter into going, and I think Walter's first year was '84-'85. So when he came in, the whole game changed for them, because now they have another weapon. They already had Winnington and Mark Jackson and Ron Stewart and Chris and Walter and Mike Moses, Willie Glass. They had a lot of guys. They had a lot of weapons, and Walter was probably number 2 behind Chris in their weapons.
Aaron, I actually have a question for you on this, because you said that you rewatched the game last night, and I did the same, unbeknownst to each other. But what was the main thing that stuck out to you from watching that Final Four at Rupp? I want to see if we had the same thought on this.
Oh, just watching the game. I mean, I love the small stadium, but then I was just amazed that you guys just that perfect second half. I mean, to beat that team, we just did the top 50 teams of all time, and that Georgetown team made it. They don't win it all, but that team is unbelievable. You guys just play. That's the beauty of the tournament. You guys play a perfect game to beat them, and nothing less than that would have beat them.
Well, you say that, Aaron, and we played a perfect game, and everybody says that, but we had 17 turnovers.
Well, that's true. No doubt.
It's a lot of turnovers, 17 turnovers. And if we didn't shoot 90%, the only shot in the second half that we missed, Patrick blocked it. So if we didn't shoot, and we only won the game by 2.
Yeah.
So how good are they that we only beat them by 2 points, and we had to shoot almost 80% for the game?
That was one thing that I was
today.
Yeah, that was one thing that stuck out to me, was the whole mantra of the perfect game. And then as, the clock winds down and you guys win by 2 or whatever, I'm like, if that truly was the perfect game, they won by 2 points. Like, the perfect game should be a 30-point blowout. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. But it wasn't. But, yeah, Meyer, you talking about the Rupp just being played at Rupp. 2 things stood out to me about watching a Final Four in 1985 as opposed to watching a Final Four in 2021. And I think that there's some parallels to this year's tournament, although the fans aren't there. But it is cool, and obviously we're Indiana guys. That's where we're both located, and our company is founded out of. And so we love all the venues for this NCAA tournament this year. But we just love games in Final Fours being played in basketball arenas that were built for basketball. Yeah. And then the other thing that stood out, and then I want your take on it. The other thing that stood out to me was that crowd did not seem like a corporate crowd like we get at Final Fours nowadays. That was like there were fans in there, every bit of it.
I agree with you. I mean, and it seemed like everybody, first of all, Georgetown was kind of hated by everybody for whatever reason. All right. And, and the Kentucky Wildcats played there, so they kind of adapted the Wildcats as their Kentucky Wildcat team. So the place was raucous, loud, exciting. It was electric. And I understand what you're saying, JB, because I was at the 16 and the 18 championships, and they were both in big football stadiums, and you just don't have the same feel. We had good seats, but you were so far off the court, it almost like you're almost watching it on the big board.
We aren't nearly as accomplished as you are, but we can shoot the basketball, and I always feel for the shooters that depth perception in those domes is a tough thing to deal with, as opposed to like I wish this year with how funky everything is with
Play
this
it at
year.
Hinkle.
Put it at Hinkle. Like that's our crown jewel here. Put it at Hinkle.
Yeah.
Fill it 25%. It's going to feel and sound like it's probably at 75% at that. And you let those guys just play it in one of the greatest venues in the country, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that, the Palestra, and some of the other cathedrals of the game, that's definitely one of them, Hinkle. And unfortunately for us, that's not our best place to play. We don't really do that well there.
Okay, so getting and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I want you to talk just a little bit about the Big East in general, not specific to Villanova or to that 85 game, but just what was it like playing in the Big East Conference, because it's waxed so poetically poetically now. And 30 for 30 Requiem for Big East, led us into a lot of that stuff. But what was it like to just be a part of that? Because in my mind, I feel like you were talking about where you went and met up with your buddy from St. John's and stuff. Most of you guys had to have run into each other through high school and been recruited by a lot of the same schools and all that stuff. And then you end up in these just fierce rivals, and these coaches are going at each other. And just, can you take us back in time and time machine it to what the Big East was like back in those days?
Well, every game was a battle. It was kind of go hard or go home. If you weren't ready to play and get banged up, bruised up, sometimes bloodied up, then you shouldn't be there. I mean, it's every game. There was no nights off. The weaker teams back then were probably Seton Hall and Providence, maybe a little bit Connecticut. Connecticut was probably the worst of the three, and but you still couldn't take off in those games, and then you get, and every team had one or two real superstar players. You look at Pearl Washington and some of the guys that played at Syracuse, Chris Mullen, who's a Hall of Famer, top 50 all-time player, Patrick Ewing, Eddie Pinckney on our team, and you go down the line. So every game was a battle, and it was very, very physical. I mean, not like today. I mean, we all laugh at some of the things. It's funny to talk with, because we're at Villanova, we're tight with the 85 team is tight with the 16 team and the 18 team, and sometimes we go back and forth, especially with Chris Jenkins, about basketball back then versus basketball now.
Sure.
And he's got his very strong opinions, and we have ours. So it's kind of fun to go through that with them, but. And then playing at Madison Square Garden, we've talked about it recently with some of the stuff that we're doing on our show. And
go ahead and plug your show. That's a good spot to plug your show.
We have a show. Sonny Sparrow and I, who played at Syracuse, have a show called the Big East Rewind, and it's a podcast. It's also on YouTube, and we've been talking with guys. There's different perspectives from the Big East from back then, like what you're talking about. We've had everybody on, from players to coaches to media people to mascots and announcers and managers. It's been a wild ride, and everybody says the same thing. The Big East tournament was nothing like that in the whole world. It was so electric. When you walked into the Garden, it was like you knew it was a big event, especially if you were able to get to that Final Four weekend, that Friday night or Saturday when they played the last game on Sunday. That Final Four day was kind of a really, really cool place to play. Whether you won or lost, it was electric in that place. And I never felt being in an arena like the Garden, like at those moments. You've never really felt that before. It's hard to describe to somebody that's never been there,
That's what I was asking you to do, by the way.
Yeah.
But you did a good job.
Yeah.
So you talked about hating, you didn't really put it this way, but St. John's having your guys' number and a team that you guys didn't really like running up against so much that their style didn't fit or or whatever. Let's flip that and reverse that. If there was another Big East team during that time, your time at Villanova, that you could have played for, that you would have liked to have played for, maybe it was the players on the team that you really liked, later on when you got to meet them, or a coach that really was like the style that you were looking for, maybe similar to Matt's, or maybe somebody completely different. Or maybe you just wanted to be on a team that was just dominant like Georgetown or something like that. If there was another Big East team during that time frame that you could have played on besides Villanova, if it hadn't been Villanova, who was it and why?
That's a great question. I visited Syracuse on my recruiting visit, and I actually stayed with Sonny Sparrow and Sean Currens there. I would have said to you probably St. John's or Syracuse, only because the guys on those teams were so great. I mean, I've been friendly with the guys from Syracuse for years, with Raphael Addison, Andre Hawkins, Wendell, Pearl. I spoke to Pearl about maybe a week or 10 days before he passed, and Raph was in the hospital room with him, and they called me and said, "Hey, Chucks wants to talk to you," and it was kind of, those guys are really good players, and they're good people, as are the St. John's guys. Through Ronnie, I got to know a lot of those guys, and I would have loved to have played with Chris. And I've played in men's leagues with Chris. When you come into a high school gym and you got to guard the guy at half court because he can make it from half court, it was, that would have been fun, either one of those two teams. Just because of the people part of it, it would have been a lot of fun.
No doubt about it. We've got a part that we're asking everybody, and this one's we're calling Hardwood Heaven, of course, as a part of the campaign here. So the gates of Hardwood Heaven open. Dr. Naismith meets you, escorts you to the Beasts of the East section of his basketball utopia. Who's the first person, team, or coach that you see, or who is the first one you want to walk in and talk to and catch up with?
Well, there's only one. I got to say, Coach Rollie Massimino. That would be my guy. The relationship that he has with his players, in particular, myself. I can only speak for myself, but the relationship that I had with him went literally right up to the day he passed away. And he taught us about loyalty and family, and what those things meant. And if you were loyal to him, he was loyal, 10 times more. He always said, "I'll be able to do more for you than you could ever do for me." And he made me kind of the social director of that 85 group. So anything that comes up, he would say, "Just call Everson, he'll take care of it." And because he knew I would call him and said, "Hey, do you want us doing this, or do you want us to stay away from this? What do you think?" I would bounce stuff off him all the time and just make sure that he was good before I started getting the guys together and stuff. And then we all got together later in his life, and we'd always go down around Super Bowl. So we'd come in like Thursday night, Friday, we'd have a cocktail party and a big Italian dinner. Mrs. Mass, when she was able to do it, made all the fixings, and then his daughters took over the cooking chores. And then he had a game on Saturday, and we'd all go to the game and be in the locker room with his kids. And then we'd have a Super Bowl party at his house on Sunday. We'd all catch the red eye home on Monday. That's awesome. And then, when they put him into hospice, the family, they called me, Brian Harrington, and Harold Presley, and we all went down there. They said, "Look, you got to get on the next plane. He's not going to make it through the week." And we all got down there and said goodbye to him on that Monday, and into Tuesday. Got to say goodbye when he passed away on Wednesday. And he had Jay Wright was there, and Billy Cunningham, and a lot of his guys. It was pretty touching. And if you would have said to me, and one of the things that I liked about him when I was a kid was that, I knew that when he was talking about family and all that stuff, that, he really meant it. And it wasn't just me, it was my whole family. It wasn't just me. He includes everybody, which, Jay has taken all of the things that Coach Mass started, the pillars of the Villanova culture, and Jay's taken them another level. He polished them up, put his spin on it, and taken them up a whole nother level. So I would definitely 100% say Coach Mass.
What's your favorite Mass story from back in your playing days?
God, there's so many of them. I tell you one. This is pretty cool. This was pretty funny. My senior year, we're playing at Providence, and some guy behind me is ribbing me to death. Are you going to get in, Everson? Are you going to play? Are you going to play? So, and the guy's sitting in the second row, and back then it was right behind you. It was like 5 feet maybe from you, And I'm going back at him, and I'm talking to him. His wife's with him. I'm saying stuff like, "What are you doing with that guy? You should be with a real guy," like the Clever Lang thing,
Yeah.
And so Rollie comes down the other and goes, "What the hell's going on down here, Chuck?" I go, "This guy's breaking my balls, coach. He's all over me for it." He goes, "Which guy?" I go, "This guy." Without blinking, in the middle of a game, he reaches in his pocket, pulls out a Corey, flips it to him. He says, "Call somebody that gives a damn." Only he didn't say damn. And he high fives me and goes back to coaching. Goes back to coaching the game.
The high five is the best part of that story.
Yeah,
for
me,
sure.
Does that, boom, and he goes, and he's like nothing ever happened. There's so many of them with him though, and we, down in Florida, we go to this place called Duffy's Sports Bar. So now we're crossing the street, and Brian Harrington and Coach are in the crossway, and a guy's coming around the corner, and he's doing 25 miles an hour roughly, and he starts to speed up. And so Dwayne and I are on the curb, like, this guy, they're gonna. So Brian says, "Jump." Brian jumps on the hood, and this guy hits Coach right full force with the car. He's down on the ground, and he had a Chivas Regal glass, and he didn't spill a drop. He held it over his head. He landed on the ground. So the guy gets out of the car. Now he's terrified because Dwayne and I go up to him.
Yeah,
He was an older, elderly black guy, gray hair. He was terrified. So Coach said, "Don't worry, they're not going to hurt you. Help me up. So now a crowd's gathered, and they said, you can't. He goes to the guy, "Listen, you should seriously consider not driving anymore because you were in the crosswalk and you just plowed us over." So the guy said, "I'm sorry." He goes, "All right, go home. All right, let's go, guys." So, "Are you all right?" Yeah, I'm all right. So people are coming over and say, "We got to get an ambulance. We got to get the cops. You can't let the guy go." He goes, "Hey, listen, my wife's got pasta on." And he goes, "I like it al dente." He goes, "It's going to be mush if we don't go right now. We got to go." So we get in the car, and he's calling his friends. He goes, "I just got run over, but you don't care, all these things. We're joking around about it." So the next day is the game. So he's screaming down for me and Brian to get with him. "Come on, I'm going to be late to the game." I said, "You all right?" He goes, "Yeah, I got a black and blue on my cheek. I'm fine." So we get in the locker room. He goes, "I tell you what, guys, I'm the toughest son of a gun in the room. Tell him, Chuck." And I go, "Hey, Coach took a charge on a Toyota last night. You better be diving on the floor and doing whatever he asks because he's the toughest guy here." So.
Legend.
Awesome. What a perfect way to end it, Chuck.
Yep.
We really appreciate you taking the time and talking to us. If you ever need anything from us, where we're at, and you know how to get in touch with me. I'm happy to take care of you and yours. So let me know what we can do to repay the favor. But again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you having me on. Good luck with everything. This sounds like a great venue. I loved it. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.